watching Goal Line Extended presented by Lacrosse Flash.
What's going on, lacrosse fans? Welcome to Goal Line Extended on the Lacrosse Flash Podcast Network. Today is Friday, September 3rd, and I'm your host, Ryan Hulsebos. And whether you are watching on YouTube or listening on any podcast platform, we're glad that you're here as we get set to look ahead to semifinal lacrosse coming your way on Sunday morning when we see the Atlas and the Chaos battle it out for the first spot in the PLL championship game, with the second spot to be decided immediately afterwards when the Water Dogs and the Whipsnakes meet for the second time this season. And we have a handful of notable names set to make their returns in what is and has been incredibly high-stakes lacrosse. And joining me today to talk about all of that and Sunday's semifinals is Flash writer Noah Landes, better known on Twitter as PLL Chirps. Noah, how are we feeling today as we get closer and closer here to semifinal lacrosse?
Good morning. I'm ready. It seems like this break has been an eternity. I guess I get why they did it, and it helps to bring back those guys that were injured, but I am so ready for some semifinal lacrosse.
If you think about it, since the All-Star break, right? We had week 5, and then the next week we had the All-Star break. The week after that was a bye week. Then we had week 7 because the All-Star game technically, quote-unquote, was week 6. So then we had the bye week after the All-Star break before week 7. Then we had another bye week before week 8. Then we had the quarterfinals, another bye week. Now we have the semifinals here. So very excited to have lacrosse back this weekend. Definitely get excited for this weekend. Obviously, PLL semifinals Sunday morning and afternoon. But no, we'll have college football week 1 already started, going throughout the weekend, throughout Saturday. There we go. OU, my South Carolina Gamecocks play on Saturday night. I think we have Eastern Illinois home game. Definitely going to be rowdy, going to be a great time. Also, the final Sunday that will be without NFL football, but it will be a great Sunday because we have these back-to-back semifinal lacrosse games. So if you're not already excited for the weekend, get freaking pumped for the weekend, all right? It's Friday. Come on. Let's get this show started. I said a couple times on Tuesday's show that we're awaiting status updates from the league on a handful of guys, whether it was Chaos attackman Chris Cloutier, who we talked about with Coach Towers on Tuesday's show, Atlas goalie Jack Concannon. He's been out for almost half the season at this point with a groin injury. And then probably most notably, Water Dogs rookie attackman Michael Sowers, who we haven't seen since sustaining a head-related injury back all the way in week 1. And following the bye week, ahead of Sunday's semifinals, we've gotten from the league, and it's all great news, as all 3 of those names, along with a few others, will be making their returns to their respective teams' rosters this weekend. And I want to start with Chris Cloutier first, because Noah, we just had Coach Towers on the show earlier in the week. He talked about how it's all about fit, how it's all about making sure all the pieces fit into how the offense is supposed to operate in order to be successful, obviously, score goals, win games. He said that Kyle Jackson was a great fit to replace Cloutier. It's a guy that Towers said was ready all season. He's been, he's could step up given the opportunity. That was what Towers looked at Jackson. Obviously, if the opportunity came, he believed he could step up and take it. B, he did just that. He stepped up when given that opportunity. He scored 4 goals, dished out 2 helpers in a playoff win. And then C, he just fits as that lefty replacement for Cloutier to balance the field in those trip sets that the Chaos run offensively. Cloutier is now coming back from injury. You'd imagine he's 100%. We don't know that for a fact, but we'd imagine he is. And because of that, I'd imagine he steps back in and starts. But Noah, do you think that's the right move given Jackson's performance from 2 weeks ago against the Archers in the quarterfinals?
Yeah, I think you can find a way to make it work. I don't see a scenario where they take out Jackson for Cloutier. I think it would be one of those things where maybe you see a Tanner Cook, a young guy that has contributed, but he's coming in from the midfield. Maybe you squeeze him out. Maybe you could make an argument for Chase Frazier, but he's also played really well alongside Jackson. And so, when you have all of those things combined, you've got a little bit of life and a little bit of momentum that these 2 guys kind of injected into the team, and Jackson and Frazier, while Cloutier was, was out. So I don't think you can take that away, especially when you're trying to ride that momentum to a semifinal win. So you got to bring Cloutier back. He's a staple in your offense. He's one of the best attackmen in the game, and he fits really well as well. So you got to make it work somewhere. I think you go to the midfield and you may take one of those guys out. They're not one of those teams that likes to initiate traditionally from the midfield like these other teams do. They just don't really north-south dodge. And so I think you can get away with maybe one less midfielder there. But bringing back Cloutier and keeping Jackson in the lineup is probably one of those things that's imperative to their offensive success this week, because they need that ball movement, they need that touch, and honestly, they need a little bit of that life that he injected when he was on the field.
The Chaos really don't play in a traditional kind of position offense. It's kind of positionless defense. We've obviously heard that a ton this season, obviously, when talking about the Chaos. And I can't say that we're 100% positive that Cloutier will start in this semifinal in place of Kyle Jackson against his former team, the Atlas, who did trade him to the Chaos this offseason. So Cloutier definitely wants to make this return. But I can probably say for certain that he takes one of those 19 game day roster spots as the Chaos look to punch their ticket to the PLL championship for the second year in a row. I don't think he would have been activated if the plan wasn't for him to play at least in some of a limited role, but I'd imagine role. And Noah, it's obviously going to be, you said it, at the expense probably of Kyle Jackson starting. We don't know if that's the case, but that roster spot vacated by Cloutier when he got injured was given to Jackson. So the question of who falls off the game day 19 or that restricted 20 and 21 now becomes an even bigger question. But with Cloutier's return, who do you think falls off that game day roster for the Chaos? I know you mentioned there Tanner Cook, Ryan Smith, another rookie that we could see kind of get the short straw here of Chris Cloutier returning.
Yeah, I mean, with Jackson's performance, I think he's probably safe. I just don't think you want, like, you're taking that type of, possibility off the field in a final game, and it just doesn't make sense. So, like you said, the younger guys, maybe the guys that aren't proven as much, maybe you go and you take off, one of your short stick D middies and you try to, get away with that. I just think for this Chaos team, they need to win a game that is, for lack of a better term, chaotic on offense, and they need to focus all of their time and all of their energy on making things move as fast as possible, move as random as possible. And I think by adding Cloutier into the mix and keeping these other guys, you have that. A slow, kind of methodical lacrosse game is not one that bodes well for Chaos. They need that pep in their step. They need the other team to feel uncomfortable and not play at the pace that they want to play. And to do that, you need to possess the ball, you need to move the ball around, and you need to be, a little bit random. And so I think you probably get rid of one of those younger pieces, even though Ryan Smith and Tanner Cook is great as well. I mean, he's contributed to this team just as much as any of these young guys. But, I mean, when it comes down to it, this is a semifinal game. You need your veterans in the lineup. You need the guys that have played together the most in the lineup. And I think that bodes well for keeping Jackson in.
Obviously, when it comes to those possessions, we're going to see Trevor Baptiste, who finished the year with the best face-off percentage in the league, won the most face-offs, going against Max Adler, who has played much better here in the last couple of weeks. Definitely in week 8, he played much better, obviously getting the Stephen Kelly, I believe it was the Charlie Leonard matchup against the Redwoods there in week 8, and then had Stephen Kelly there again in the quarterfinals. He's been playing much better, but obviously has had those struggles. And when you talk about going up against Trevor Baptiste, that's a whole mission to try to accomplish there in and of itself. But another name that did not dress in Salt Lake City, and we haven't really seen him we haven't seen him since before the All-Star break, is midfielder Jake Fracaro, who I did not bring up, I should say, in our interview with Coach Towers earlier this week. He hasn't dressed since a Week 5 win over the Chrome. He only has 10 points on the season, 9 of them coming in 2 games, and he was held pointless in 3 of the 6 games that he did play early in the season, including his final 2 games played in weeks 4 and 5. So maybe it's just a replacement thing with guys like Tanner Cook and Ryan Smith kind of stepping up into his role. Mac O'Keefe's also been playing mainly midfield, so obviously that takes a hit to your midfield. But if Fracaro is to return, that's another roster spot that could jeopardize a guy like Kyle Jackson or Cook, or Ryan Smith from being out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for Caro being kind of in and out of the lineup, I don't really see a reason, unless you just think of like a matchup exploitation, and that really doesn't make sense either, because Atlas have some great short stick defensive midfielders and Danny Logan, and if they dress Peter Dirth as well.
Logan, if they dress Peter Dirth, they also get Brent Adams back from injury. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that in a minute.
I mean, I just don't see a world where their folks coming in is going to be a midfield dodging type of game plan. And now that I say that, that's probably all they're going to do, because I probably jinxed them. But I think their most important piece on offense is just the attack and the cohesiveness there. They're going to want the ball in the sticks of the attackmen more than the midfielders. They'll obviously have some dodging from the midfield. Everybody does, but I think when you look at pieces that need to, come in versus pieces that need to come out, Kluche is definitely going to fit the bill more than Fracaro. And I think you can probably make an argument for most of those other attackmen, at least in my opinion. Maybe it's an old attackman's bias that I would rather have an extra attackman than another midfielder, especially when you play kind of a positionless type of offense, and it's just kind of like a little round robin, circle type of offense. I would rather have that extra attackman and maybe leave that midfielder. Now, maybe you go with an attackman that's got a little bit more experience in transition, and that bodes well again for some of these guys. Maybe not Cliche. You don't really want him getting back on defense. And you kind of say the same for Ryan Smith as well. But Tanner Cook, he could probably play both ways. I would probably rather have Tanner in there than Fracaro, just because I think he's probably meshed a little bit better with this attack line. Fracaro is kind of like your dodge and shoot, hard dodge down the middle type guy. And I think that's great for the Redwoods, but this isn't the Redwoods. This is the Chaos. This is a team that passes the ball, pass, shoot, one more type of offense. And so I love Fracaro. I think he's a great guy, and I think he's a great presence for some team. I think you could probably see him maybe in an expansion draft coming up. But at least for right now in this kind of playoff style game, I don't know that Towers is probably going to give him the nod.
We saw at last year's championship series out in Utah, Connor Fields kind of get worked out of that Chaos offensive rotation. We're kind of seeing that this year with Jake Fracaro. Connor Fields, obviously the 2019 MVP, comes into the 2020 season, plays the 4 group play games, doesn't play in the playoffs. Obviously, the Chaos going to run. Jake Fracaro, 2019 Midfielder of the Year finalist. We have not seen him here since the All-Star break. So definitely something to focus on as we await team rosters for Sunday. We should get them at some point today, which is Friday, possibly early into the weekend as we look ahead to these 2 semifinal games. The first between the Atlas and the Chaos, and it will be a late morning start, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, 8 a.m. Pacific on NBCSN and on Peacock, as the Chaos come in winning 3 of their last 4 games since the All-Star break. They're getting set to play in their 3rd consecutive semifinal, seeking their 2nd straight trip to the championship game. And as they've been red hot here down the stretch, but the Atlas have been as well. They enter this game as 1.5 favorites, having won 6 of their last 7 games. And while Andy Towers gets one of his offensive pieces back in Chris Cloutier, the Atlas welcome back the anchor of their defense and goalie, Jack Concannon, who's missed the past several weeks with a groin injury that he sustained back in Week 5. And as we just talked about with Cloutier, we're expecting to see Concannon play probably a lot, and I'd imagine, or I should say for Cloutier, I'd imagine he plays a lot. I'd imagine he also starts. But we can't say the same about Jack Concannon, because J.D. Colarusso has been magnificent since replacing Concannon in Week 5. And over this stretch, 6 wins in the past 7 games. It's Colarusso that has won 4 of those 6 games, not including when he came in to close things out there in Week 5 and getting the win over the Chrome. So this is a huge question that Atlas head coach Ben Rubier, defensive coordinator Glenn Clausen will need to answer before Sunday morning. Noah, do they want to stick with the hot hand and ride J.D. Colarusso, or do you go back to the guy who you originally handed over the keys and hand the starting duties back over to Jack Concannon?
Yeah, I mean, I think in this instance, in a playoff instance where you've had especially a bye week go by, my main goal as a coach would be to minimize disruptions, right? You've got some roster changes, probably, you're going to be tweaking some things, but you're riding a really hot hand in JD Colarusso. You're on a team that has 6 of their last 7 wins. You want to keep the status quo, and we don't really want to, disrupt anything. So I think that's what gets Colarusso the nod. Is it a long-term thing, like going into next year? I don't know, maybe, probably not. I think Concannon long-term is probably going to be your better goalie. I mean, he's proven solid young guy that has commanded this defense, for almost, 2 years now, 2.5 years, without his injury. So, I think they're going to go with Colarusso simply for the fact to minimize the disruptions. I think if you see things get a little weird in the first half and these Chaos going like a weird 4-goal run or something like that, you really start to see that Concannon talk pop up pretty quickly. So their leash is probably going to be pretty short. But I think just to minimize the disruptions, he's going to get that nod, and then watch out for the chaos if they start to kind of pepper him a little bit. I think you could see a change at the half. You could see a strategic change at the half just to give the Cavs something a little different to look at. If they think they're getting a little too settled and starting to figure him out, you've got a great asset in the fact that you can bring this guy in and he's got game experience, he's got playoff experience. And I really, I don't think you can lose out either way. Both of these guys have proven that they can command the defense and make saves. So in my mind, you minimize the disruptions and you don't really change anything until you have to. The minute you have to, go ahead, make the change. But right now, you just need to keep everyone calm, keep everyone comfortable. You're on a team that has played almost flawless lacrosse the second half of the season, and keep riding the wave.
Definitely, you look at the matchup. That's really what I'm looking at is matchup. Obviously, you got the chaos. Their offense. You see the chaos. They finish a lot of their goals obviously in tight. Jack Concannon is the better goalie when it comes to that. Obviously, his save percentage on the doorstep. We saw those numbers come across Twitter earlier in the week, but Concannon's save percentage on the doorstep just shy of 50%. Colaruso's just over 15%. So that's obviously the difference when you think about who you'd want to go with. But I agree with you. You want to stick with the hot hand, stick with a guy like JD Colaruso who's gotten you to this point, kept you on this hot streak. Definitely a question that I would not want to have to answer here, as this would probably be something that Atlas fans would point to, win or lose, but most likely with the loss is the reason why they lost. So a huge question that Coach Rubier and Coach Clausen will need to answer here before Sunday's game. Who starts for his team in between the pipes? But then along with Concannon, midfielder Brent Adams was activated to the team roster off of the physically unable to perform list during this week, which he was placed on there in early August. He played in the Atlas's first 6 games, though. He recorded at least 2 ground balls in all but one of them, his best performance of the season, coming against the Cannons in week 3 when the Atlas won 18-17. Adams scored a goal, his only goal of the season. He added 2 assists, and he picked up a season-high 4 ground balls in that game. So, Noah, another question that Rubier will need to answer before Sunday. With Adams healthy and available, does he take a roster spot away from, let's say, a Peter Dirth or maybe a Jake Richard in that defensive midfield, possibly even a Pohl? What do you think that Rubier does here with Adams returning?
Yeah, I mean, it pains me to say it because I love Brent Adams, but I mean, you kind of mentioned the statistics. It just didn't really make sense to take away from one of these guys who, you compare Brent Adams to a Peter Dirth, you get a better defensive midfielder in Peter Dirth, and what keeps Adams on the field is his speed and his offensive threat, and that just really hasn't been there this season. Maybe it's just kind of one of those things like for Caro where it's just not meshing. We've seen a lot of these midfielders, you know, it's kind of a sink or swim type thing with some of these teams. I definitely think Brent Adams still has a lot in the tank and he can still be a threat. But, we've had all season to just kind of try and get it figured out and, try to find his place, and it just hasn't worked out. So I don't think you can, bet on him. Oh, we're in the semifinal playoff game. He's just going to go in and figure it out, score 2 or 3 goals, and have 6 ground balls. I don't see that performance happening, and that's probably what you would need out of him to justify taking off a Dirth or a Danny Logan. I mean, Danny Logan's not coming off the field. He's one of the best.
I would say
defensive
Danny
midfielders.
Logan's safe there. Danny
Yeah,
Logan's safe.
he's not coming off the field, but even a guy like Dirth, I think he's really underrated in going both ways. And if you're the Atlas, I mean, you're going to want to do the opposite of what the Chaos are going to want to do. You're going to want to slow the game down. You're going to play it at your pace, where you kind of lull the momentum, lull the emotion, and you do that with really strong defensive midfielders who can keep the ball, in people's sticks um, and get the ball to your team pretty well. So I don't see Brent Adams coming on the field. I wish I was saying the opposite, but it's one of those things that the stats kind of speak for themselves on this one, and you got to go with your proven defensive midfield. And again, minimize the disruptions. He hasn't been in there in a few weeks. You don't want to come in there. He hasn't been able to practice. Probably, I don't know what their bye week looked like. I don't know if they had a practice or anything on their bye week or not, but I just don't know that it makes sense coming in on a 1-game win or lose, you're out type of thing.
Yeah. If Adams was to come in and replace another midfielder, which would probably be the most likely case, if he was to come in and replace another midfielder on this roster that we've seen regularly, obviously the Atlas typically dress 5 poles. I can't see them dropping down to 4. Obviously, you need a backup pole somewhere. But if they were to take someone off, it would probably be Dearth. I'd imagine we've
Yeah.
seen him a few times over the last few game weeks, but that wouldn't surprise me if they do put in Adams over Dearth, obviously trying to get that speed, trying to get that transition. But I see what you're saying. Maybe Rubier decides to pull a pull from the lineup. Andrew Newbold and Kyle Pless have both played in a handful of games this season, oftentimes not together. They usually split duties, backing up Craig Chick at LSM. But definitely, if that, that would probably have to be the case at the Atlas. Going to Philly with 5 pulls opposed to 6. I'd imagine if Adams is in, it would be at the loss there of Peter Dearth. You would pull him from the lineup. But something else to pay attention to through the remainder of today, Friday, and into the beginning of the weekend, as Jack Concannon will definitely make his return to the lineup. Rubier released goalie Tate Boyce during the week, so Concannon at the least will back up Colarusso, and then we'll have to wait and see who gets the nod from Coach Rubier to fill out the midfield. And before we move on to our second matchup, let's just make our pick here for this game. Again, Atlas and Chaos, Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern on NBCSN and Peacock from Philadelphia. And I know Coach Towers and this team doesn't want anyone picking them, running with the whole 13% and 3.2% thing. Don't support us if you weren't already supporting us. But it's the playoffs. Come on, I picked the Chaos I picked against the Chaos, I should say, last weekend. I'm sorry, I guess, to the Chaos now because I'm not doing that again. I think they cover the plus goal and a half, obviously en route to winning. And I actually added a Chaos plus 400 future to the other 2 I already have. I got the War Dogs at plus 1,000 in the preseason to win the championship, the Atlas at plus 450 ahead of the playoffs. So the odds for both teams in this first game, that's how we like to do it. The numbers probably tell me I should have the Atlas this weekend, but I add the Chaos future for a reason, and I think it's because they win this weekend. So we'll roll into semifinal weekend with some different eggs and a few different baskets, Noah. Who do you have in this first game, though, Atlas and Chaos?
Yeah, I mean, I think very easily I could just be made to look stupid about 2 minutes into the second quarter when the Chaos are up 6 goals, but I'm going to go Atlas. I think they're going to slow the game down. I think they're going to be like the methodical New England Patriots style of play, and you're going to see Jeff T score a lot of goals. You're going to see Jake Caraway bring a lot of juice, and you're going to see this defense kind of stall out this Chaos offense. And so, again, now that I've said it, the opposite's probably going to happen, but I'm going to go with Atlas, and I really think they're going to be one of our championship weekend teams.
I'm definitely seeing a close game. I definitely think this is going to be tight. Chaos plus a goal and a half is possibly my lock here of the weekend, even though I think the Water Dogs win by a couple. We'll get to that game in a little bit, but the Chaos seek their second straight championship appearances after going 0-4 in the group play at last year's championship series. They won 2 straight to get them to the championship game before falling to the Whipsnakes. They're still looking for that first championship victory, and the Atlas come into their first semifinal, seeking their first trip to the championship game. Again, 11 a.m. Eastern start, 8 a.m. on the West Coast on Sunday morning, a matchup between 2 fairly unfamiliar counterparts, as this will be just the 4th meeting in league history between these 2 teams. And our second game will also be between 2 unfamiliar sides, as the Water Dogs and Whipsnakes have met just once over the first 3 seasons of the PLL. Obviously, just the first 2 for the Water Dogs. They'll meet on Sunday following the first semifinal scheduled for 1 p.m. or 1:30 p.m. Eastern time, as the Water Dogs come in looking to win their first PLL playoff game in franchise history and seeking their first trip to the championship game. They roll into Philly having won 4 straight and playing some of their best lacrosse, and they're going to get some reinforcements here, Noah, ahead of Sunday, as rookie attackman Michael Sowers has been activated from the injured list and is finally set to make his return to the lineup, as there were rumors swirling around that he has been ready to return for a few weeks now. He'll finally get that chance this weekend to suit up with a trip to the PLL championship game on the line. And then along with Sowers, midfielder Christian Mazzone should be set to join the Water Dogs in Philadelphia after being picked up off the Archers restricted roster ahead of the postseason, as well as Juice Snyder, who we have not seen since week 4. Let's start with Sowers, though. We all know what he brings to the table in terms of his athletic ability, his passing, his speed. He fits into this Water Dogs offense. That's why Coach Copeland drafted him second overall. And really, it's just a piece to that puzzle of what is really the Andy Copeland Coach of the Year resume, because we haven't seen anything from Sowers since that week 1 injury. I personally think this is where that piece gets bigger, that Coach of the Year, Michael Sowers puzzle piece. He's going to play. I imagine he starts in place of I'd say Ben Reeves there at attack. We'll probably see him, Ryan Brown, and Kieran McCardle. And no, I don't see it, but I know the thought from many is that you don't want to come in and disrupt what is 4 straight wins. Obviously, we just talked about that with the Chaos. We talked about it a little bit with Adams and Concannon with the Atlas. I personally think Sowers comes in and elevates this offense and this team as a whole. But back to the Atlas goalie thing for Colarusso. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I see this situation as it's not broke. I'm just mega upgrading it here, and Michael Sowers is that mega upgrade. How do you view this situation, though?
Yeah, I like what you said. I mean, with Sowers, I think it's a little different. I think bringing him in, you're not going to disrupt too much, especially because he is going to play that X attack spot probably. The one thing with the Water Dogs that I wouldn't want to disrupt is their midfield production and everything like that. Slosher coming in from the top, kind of leading that charge. So I think bringing him in on attack, you kind of minimize taking away from that midfield, and if anything, you kind of make it a little bit better because they've got to now focus on Michael Sowers on the opposite end of that offensive spear and allow this, midfield to dodge and dish or dodge and shoot even a little bit more. So bringing in Sowers, I think he's one of those players, you don't want to put tiers on players, but he's a high enough tier player that you're going to bring him in and he's going to do fine. And either way, you're going to want him in the lineup because, he's just that good. Even if you're sacrificing a little bit of that cohesion. I don't think you're going to be sacrificing too much of it because, like you said, he's been with the team the last 3 or 4 weeks. He's been healthy. I even think I've heard of him practicing with the team. So he's been getting those touches. They've been kind of game planning for this. They knew, he was probably going to be coming back around this time anyway. So I think they're going to slide him in with a lot more ease than some of these guys who were coming off of injuries that, maybe were a little bit less known. And so, yeah, Sowers is going to be in there, like you said, I think probably for a Ben Reeves, but I think you still see Reeves come in out of the box and rotate with Kieran McCardle. And, I think you want to keep Ryan Brown on the field as much as possible. The best shooter in the game, playing off with Michael Sowers, one of the best feeders in the game. I think those two kind of need to stick together like glue. But that third spot, you can just kind of keep it fresh, keep it rotating, some different looks. Same thing with the midfield. You're going to want to keep some fresh looks out there as well. I think, this Whipstakes team, having the bye week helped them a lot, but, they just seem kind of out of whack. They, maybe they're unhealthy in ways that we haven't been announced that we don't know. They just don't seem like this solid Whipsnakes team that's just going to jump on you and dominate you from, first face off. And so I think you can get in there and kind of impose your will a little bit on offense against them, and get it figured out. And Sowers is probably going to do that pretty successfully, I think.
In terms of roster spots, the addition of Sowers to the lineup and Drew Snyder, which we'll talk about in a moment, from the injured list meant that 2 players had to be released by the Water Dogs as they were already at that 25-man max. If you look back at the Chaos, they were at 24 coming to the playoffs, so Cloutier just became that 25th. For the Atlas, they dropped Tate Boyce in order to bring Brent Adams in. I already had Concannon listed there, so they would have came in there with 23. But you talk about this Water Dogs playoffs at 25 players. You want to bring in Sowers, you want to bring in Snyder. That meant they had to play with the roster a little bit. So rookie midfielder Cole Williams, he hasn't played this season. Cole Williams out of Johns Hopkins, and then defenseman BJ Grill, who played in a few games for the Water Dogs earlier in the season. They drew the short straws and were released. Now we see Christian Mazzone and Drew Snyder look to try to join this Water Dogs Game Day 19, which we should find out about either later today or sometime Saturday. But Noah, just like we talked about with the Chaos and the Atlas, adding guys that haven't been in the lineup to the lineup will come at the expense of other guys that have been playing and have been contributing in the lineup. So you talk about possibly bringing on 3 new players into your 19 or even your top 21. That's going to force you to sit, let's say, a Matt Witcher who's played regularly towards the end of the regular season. Possibly a Christian Scarpello, who's played in 7 of the Water Dogs' 9 games this season. So another team to watch closely as this semifinal roster gets constructed. Who do the Water Dogs decide to play? Whether it's, do they play Mazzone? Do they play Drew Snyder? That's probably at the expense of a Witcher or a Scarpello. How do you see this situation all playing out?
Yeah, I mean, the Snyder situation is weird to me because I had a buddy actually, he brought it up to me the other day. He's like, have you seen Drew Snyder just like traveling the world this summer, like the last 3 or 4 weeks?
I
He's been in
saw
Italy.
him an Instagram picture. It was like a recap, I guess, of his month of July or something, and he was in the hospital, all hooked up to wires.
It's been the most bizarre like roller coaster of the last month for him. I don't know if he's living it up on the beach or if he's not doing well. It's a weird
If
deal.
he's not doing well, T's and P's for Drew Snyder. Obviously, he's returning, so I'd imagine he's doing much better.
Exactly, yeah. I just don't know. It's just a weird thing to justify bringing him in a semifinal game when you're going up against the defending champions. I think you've got to go with your guys that have been proven. Obviously, Snyder's really good. He's proven himself as a veteran player in professional lacrosse, but it's another one of those things where you want to minimize the disruptions. You're already bringing in Sowers, which, like I said, is probably going to be a pretty smooth transition, but their midfield has been their bread and butter for the last 2 or 3 weeks, and the sub game, transition defense, wasting time when you get the ball from defense to offense, figuring out who's coming off. All of those things can kind of get muddied up when you bring in these new guys, and that's really parts of the game that you can't have, disrupted when you're going up against this Whipsnakes team, because they do have their T's crossed and their I's dotted on pretty much every facet of the game. You assume Nardella is probably going to win the face-off battle. I think it's going to be closer than we think. Nardella's kind of struggled a little bit down the stretch. I think obviously he's one of those guys that can just flip the switch and just dominate. This Water Dogs kind of face-off unit bodes well against him though, which is kind of scrappy ground balls, make it a 50-50 type of strategy. But yeah, I think as far as Snyder goes, you gotta keep your guys on the field that have been on the field. Like you said, Witcher's been there 7 of 9 games. They've got the experience. They're in shape. You worry about Drew Snyder's shape if he's been, unhealthy. If he's been, it's just one of those things. There's too many unknowns to offset kind of what you're getting as far as what's best case scenario for Drew Snyder, right? Does he come on the field and he scores a goal and he gets 4 or 5 ground balls and that's what you replaced these guys for? Or is he going to come on and he's going to have a hat trick and he's going to have probably steal the player of the game? I don't think you see that happening. So I don't think you disrupt these guys that have been on the field.
Definitely looking at the rest of this War Dogs midfield. Obviously, you don't want to take Ryan Conrad out of the lineup. I don't think that's even a possibility, thinking about the role that Ryan Conrad has played along with Zach Currier kind of in that defensive midfield. Obviously, Scarpello as well. That's kind of really the big question mark because you bring in Mazzone, you bring in Snyder. I don't know if we see one of them or possibly both of them. So definitely something that we will be watching very closely because you kind of look at the rest of this team. You don't want to really pull a 4th attackman from the starting lineup. Michael Krause will probably get the short straw in terms of looking at their 5 attackmen, Brown, Sowers, McCardle, Reeves. They'll probably all play or at least be on that top 21. Krause, most likely the short straw, but you just kind of look at the midfield. You look at the defense. The War Dogs only have 5 active pulls in the lineup now as it is with the release of BJ Grill. So I'd imagine Gobrek, Sabia, Burns, Randall, Reese. I think we see all 5 of them starting. I just don't think there's enough room for both of them. We might see one of them, Mazzone or Snyder. So something to watch here as we get into the weekend. But the Water Dogs come into their first playoff game here in the semifinals after finishing the regular season as the top seed, getting a bye through the first round straight to the semifinals. But they come in with the second best odds, plus 250 to win the championship. And they come in as the underdogs in this game to the 5 seed, which sounds wild, Noah, but it makes sense when you see it is that Whipsnakes team who are that number 5 seed holding the best odds to win the championship on September 19. The 2-time defending Shipsnakes, led by 2019 MVP Matt Rambo, 2020 MVP Zed Williams, among many others. And those many others, including Rambo and Williams, have started to kick it into another gear here over the last couple weeks. Really, since that Week 8 game following that Week 7 loss to the War Dogs. But something different that we'll see this weekend is who is starting in the cage, as Terry Foy from Inside Lacrosse shared with us earlier in the week that goalie Brian Phipps will likely get the start over Kyle Bernlohr, who has struggled as of late, saving just 47% of the shots that he's faced in the 3 games since the All-Star break. He saved 48% on the season. And Noah, this is a bold move by Stagnito. Do we think it's the right move?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think it is. I was one of those guys where, you could kind of see earlier on in the season that Whipsnakes were kind of living and dying by how well Bernlohr was playing, especially in those days where, you had Rambo out, you had Zed out. That was their most important asset was, okay, how well are we going to play in goal? We're going to stall out this game and score just enough goals. We're going to hit enough singles to get by. Nardella's going to get us the ball enough. Now, I don't think it's as big a deal because you've got your horses back in Rambo and Zed. I think they're going to have enough domination on that attack unit where they're not going to have to play it as safe and collect possessions as much as they did a few weeks ago. But it's still a very important position for them because they're not a team that's going to, from the minute the game starts, just go on this massive run. I think they're going to kind of play settled. They're going to play their game. And so Phipps, he's proven himself last week. Obviously, he came in and he knocked out, or 2 weeks ago, he came in and knocked out my Redwoods. And momentum and juice is going to be one of those things that in playoff games can be your biggest difference maker. I think Bernlohr is going to be one of those guys on the sidelines who absolutely supports Phipps, if he gets the nod and he's going to be there bringing the juice from the sidelines. And then it's another one of those situations where if things kind of go awry and these Water Dogs go on a 4 or 5 goal run, you've got a guy you can bring in and slow the pace down, slow the vibe down, kind of calm everyone down because Bernlohr's proven in playoff games throughout college and playoff games throughout the pros that he can do that. So, I think it's kind of the same situation as the Alice. You go with the hot-handed Phipps. You give him the shot. I don't think there's really an argument to be made for not taking that chance. But the minute things kind of start to get out of whack, Dogs go on a run. The Dogs are one of those teams that they kind of live on runs. They live on that momentum swing, and they die by it too. So, if you can stop the bleeding by bringing in Bernlohr, if they go on a 3-goal run, the Whips could probably capitalize on that like they have the last couple weeks, stopping the bleeding and then going on their own run. So, yeah, Phipps, I think, is your guy. Bring in Bernlohr if things get messy. Bernlohr is going to be your general, obviously, on the sideline as well. He's going to support Phipps and vice versa. If Phipps gets pulled, midway through the game or something like that, you've got a really good group of guys there that, that defense is going to follow whoever's between the pipes. It's not going to matter. So, keep your momentum rolling and you're the Whipsnakes. You're like the Yankees of lacrosse. You've proven yourselves as winners. So, go out there and do what you've done the last 2 years. Just make it work.
New York
for
Yankees,
some reason.
man. New York Yankees had won 13 straight there. We lost 4 straight. Now we're getting hot again, though. Playoff push coming on for the Yanks, but Brian Phipps is set to make his first start of the season on Sunday. After starting the year with the Redwoods, he was picked up by the Whipsnakes from the Redwoods reserve roster just a couple weeks ago, and after making 6 saves and allowing just 4 goals in a second-half quarterfinal comeback against his former team, the Redwoods, he gets the nod for this Sunday's semifinal. And Noah, it makes sense, but I kind of look at it as a surprise too, because granted, Bernlohr hasn't played all that great the past couple weeks. 47% since the All-Star break was generous. He's saved just 41% since Independence Day. But one of his best games of the season came against the Water Dogs just over a month ago. In Week 7, Bernlohr turned away 61% of the shots on cage that he faced. He made 14 saves, allowed 11 goals in what was an ugly loss, but we blame that on just 6 goals offensively. So I think that Stagnito would want to stick with Bernlohr if the matchup was right. That's something that I would have thought. It seems to be right, but he does go with Phipps here. But, definitely an interesting decision by Coach Stagnito and this Whipsnakes staff. They're looking to reach a second time in 8th straight championship. They will need to get past the Water Dogs here first, and we'll see if Brian Phipps can lead the Whipsnakes past them. And guys, before I let you go here, Noah, let's make our picks for this game. And for everyone watching and listening, our full Flash staff picks will be available on Twitter and Instagram ahead of Sunday morning's first game. Again, I'll start. I was preaching it before the season started. The trade for Ryan Brown. draft Michael Sowers second overall. You draft Ethan Walker late. He's played a big role here. The addition of Michael Krause, even though we might not see him this weekend, the late offseason trades for Eli Gobrecht and goalie of the year finalist Dylan Ward. This team was built to make a run. It kind of got off to a rocky start, but they figured it out here. You now add in Sowers to the lineup, Mazzone, possibly Drew Snyder. They are all gritty players. They want to come in and win, contribute in big ways. Plus 1,000 in the preseason on the Water Dogs. I know there's the questions as if they disrupt any chemistry that's already there. They've also had 3 weeks off since they've last played. I'm just going to completely forget about that fact. But my confidence is at an all-time high right now. I think the Water Dogs win this game by at least 3 goals, as I said there before, maybe even 4. But Noah, how do you think this game shakes out? Water Dogs and Whipsnakes.
Yeah, I think the Water Dogs pull it out. I think you mentioned the 3 weeks off. I think their one Achilles heel could be, a slow start where you just
That's
kind of
one
see
thing that I'm worried about. Well, only thing I'm worried about.
Yeah, and the Water Dogs are one of those teams where when they're hot, they're the hottest team in the league. But if they get on this weird funk where they're just not working, it could be a disaster. And I think you're probably going to see in the first quarter, you're going to know which Water Dogs team you're going to get, right? So, by the end of the first quarter, we'll know. I'm still going to stick with them. I think they're going to have a little juice, bringing back Sowers. They're going to know what they're playing for. Obviously, you're coming into a playoff game. You know how big of a deal this is. You're going up against the defending champs. And some would argue the villains of the league at this point, right? I mean, if you're a Whipsnakes fan, you're kind of scowling at me. But, I think a lot of these guys just want to dethrone them. And so I think you take that coupled with the fact that they're getting Sowers back. They're a team that really at the beginning of the season, you and Dan Arestia were probably the only 2 people picking them to go to the playoffs and even make a run. So credit to you guys. But I think they're probably going to do it. I think they pull it out. I think this Whipsnakes team, they're still really good, but I think they probably need to do a little bit of offense or off season moves and just kind of fill some voids that may have been exposed. And maybe they get back in the championship next year. But I think this year it's going to be Atlas Water Dogs. And I think you probably, I don't know. You may see some Atlas championship banners in the future. At least for this week, I'm going Water Dogs over Whipsnakes.
Definitely. If the Chaos are to lose, I feel like I'm going to get some very bad rep here. I think I'm gonna have a lot of people very upset with me here that I went off track here, picked the Chaos. But definitely we'll see how these games shake out. Definitely in terms of kind of the championship matchup we could see. If the Atlas and Water Dogs both win this weekend, we'll see a championship between the teams that selected first and second overall in this year's college draft. So just showing the parity that we've obviously seen all season, the last 2 years here in the PLL. If the Whipsnakes and Chaos win, we will see a 2020 championship rematch, which wouldn't be the end of the world. That wouldn't be the worst thing to happen. And then if we see the Atlas and Whipsnakes, that's just a matchup we'll see. Water Dogs and Chaos would be kind of our Team Canada. The Water Dogs and Chaos kind of being our 2 quote-unquote Team Canadas. We'll see that matchup. There's definitely a lot on the line here this weekend in the semifinal. Obviously, elimination lacrosse. It all starts at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific. Is the Atlas and the Chaos on Peacock and NBCSN. So make sure to set your alarms and get up early. Immediately following that one is the Water Dogs and the Whipsnakes at 1:30 p.m. Eastern, 10:30 Pacific, also on Peacock and NBCSN. So if you missed that first game, just tune into NBCSN. The second game will be playing immediately after. And as we have just 2 more PLL game days remaining, so make sure to tune in. As I've been telling people that are just now getting into lacrosse or aren't and are thinking about it, now is the time to get into professional lacrosse. With these 2 semifinals, we'll have a week off before the championship game in 2 weeks. Then the NLL gets started up in early December. That leads us into the college season, Noah, which leads us back into the 2022 PLL season, and then you're set. You have your team. You'll know your best players heading into next season. You'll watch our shows from Flash so that you're all set for each game weekend. Every weekend, we're all enjoying lacrosse. Everyone will be having a great time, and that's just what we want here from Lacrosse Flash.
We're going to keep it going. We're spoiled. I mean, 4 or 5 years ago, you had your college season and you maybe got lucky and a couple MLL games were streamed online. Now it seems like year-round, you're going to have NLL coming up soon. And guys, if you're listening to this show and you're a PLL fan and you haven't watched any NLL, you need to do it. It's on ESPN Plus. I know you already have it. Everybody does. tune in, watch these guys. You're going to see a lot more crossover from field to box than you think, and you're going to be a better, lacrosse fan for it. So stay with us. We're going to have a lot coming out, and we'll see how
we're gonna have a ton coming out.
We're going to have a ton coming out. We're going to see how the end of this PLL season goes, and it's not going to slow down. So
a lot of big names in the NLO. We're seeing a lot of rookies, young guys, especially in the PLL, get these chances. I know we were talking about it on Tuesday's show before Coach Towers joined us, me and Austin. But the Bandits just traded for Connor Fields. They have pretty much the entire chaos starting lineup. So it's like if you're a fan of the PLL, you'll find your team in the NLO.
Yeah, I think
I haven't found mine yet. I don't know if you've found yours yet, though. Have you found your NLO team yet?
I wanted to give the Panther City Lacrosse a little bit of a nod as we lived in Fort Worth for a year, but I'm holding out for one of my Florida teams. NLL, if you're listening, Commissioner Nick, bring some guys down south for me, and and come play in the Lightning. No, I think here in the first couple weeks I'm going to make a pick for my team. I really like the Mammoth. I've followed them for a little bit too, but no one enough yet to where I'm like, yep, those are my guys. So stay tuned for that.
I feel like I got options. Like I don't have a PLO team just because I like to really actually go in. I was about to say I like to be like objective. Like I don't have a horse in the race, but it's more like I want to just go into every weekend and be like, yeah, like last weekend I didn't pick the Chaos. This weekend I like the Chaos. I want to pick the Chaos this weekend. Like that's kind of how I like it with the PLO. I'm looking at the NLO. Obviously, I'm from Northern Jersey. There's a couple teams up there in New York, Buffalo, Rochester, obviously, that I could choose from. I'm down in South Carolina right now. I could obviously go with Georgia. Georgia is a powerhouse, as I've been hearing, as people have been telling me. So definitely, I got choices. We'll have to be making our picks for who our NLO team is going into the year soon at some point. So that's something that we'll discuss. But definitely looking ahead to the semifinals, we're very excited for it. Noah, I want to thank you for joining me today as we look ahead to those two games here in the Premier Lacrosse League playoffs, and that is going to do it for today's show. I want to thank you all for watching and or listening. If you are not already, make sure to subscribe to Goal Line Extended and Lacrosse Flash on YouTube. Hit that notification bell so that you get notified of future shows. You can also follow along on Instagram and Twitter at GL Extended and at Lacrosse Flash. All of the links that you will need will be in the description of the video or podcast that you are watching or listening to right now. And make sure to head on over to lacrosseflash.com. You can check out all of our content looking ahead to this weekend's games. And then I hope you all have a fantastic weekend. Enjoy the semifinals, and we will be back on Tuesday to recap it all on the PLL Flash. Enjoy the weekend. Cheers.
Follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at GL Extended and subscribe to the show on any of your favorite podcast outlets. You can find Lacrosse Flash on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook and online at lacrosseflash.com.